And hello, everybody. All about the gyro here. And patch number 3 is out, and they have released the BoP for the Daytona 24 hours. So the BoP is separate from the patch. So I'm going to bring up on my browser here some weights because there's a couple of vehicles that I normally drive that are going to be impacted. And now that I have it up, because you know I drive the Porsche, here we go. So, first thing, let me quit Discord here for a moment, is for the patch. For those that are into AI, you are gaining Spa and Watkins Glen on the road, and then on ovals, iRacing Speedway at Richmond Raceway. The AIs receive additional training in both the Formula Sprint car and the Indy Pro car, the TCR, and the Kia. You have your usual fixes, but let's go to the first major BOP, and that is what you see here. If you're in the Audi, most of the GT3s were changed. The Audi fuel rate has been increased. The Aero has been reduced. Its sister car, the Lambo, you'll see below, its fuel rate has also been changed. BMW, they've made it a little bit easier, a little bit less fuel consumption, a little bit more aero. For our Dallara iRacing 01, the UF-ship parameters have been improved. So this was a major concern that's been expressed by folks. And so I'm very happy to see that. Now, let's talk about the LMP2. The first thing, engine power has been reduced, so 40 brake horsepower has been taken off to match the specs. Tire warmer temps have been updated. It's now been increased to 70 Celsius. So, apologies for those that think in Fahrenheit, but I think that is roughly 150 to 160 Fahrenheit. I'll have to check, but it's been increased. Third pin and pushrod lengths you can now adjust. That helps with mechanical grip. So that's making the car a little bit more drivable for folks like myself that don't drive a downforce car very often. Reduced camber, and they've updated as standard iRacing setups. Here's what this means. All of your setups for the 217, throw them out. They don't apply anymore. They will have to be worked on to tune the car. So what I'm expecting is a little bit more trimmed out. It'll be a little bit less wing in the back because you have increased grip to try to recover that little bit of performance with the 40 brake horse reduction. Ferrari fans have something to shout about because both the GTE and GT3 cars get better fuel mileage. Specifically for the 24 hours, this addresses a concern that the 488s were having to do extra fuel stops over 24 hours because the car was a little bit thirsty. If you like the Ford GT3, they changed the gear stack yet again. And the Lambo, the fuel consumption has gone up, similar to the Audi. They do share the same motor. In the McLaren, which by most reports, thirstiest GT3 car, they've now tweaked the fuel consumption. And of course, our nostalgic favorite, the Mercedes GT3, is gained yet a little bit more aero and better fuel mileage. So they're trying to make it competitive. I'll be curious to see how that car gets along. Now, Porsche. They've increased the minimum weight by 5 kilos. So, 5 kilos, and I have flipped you over to the other tab, is only 11 pounds. So, this weight, which I look at it, yep, they've already changed it roughly because the dry weight is this. This may be with the oil and all that in it, but they've added a little bit of weight to the Porsche. So 5 kilos on a car, 11 pounds on a car that's only 2,700. That, 2,700 pounds is 1,243 kilos. It may make a difference. Now, if we come over and just for example, if you come over here to the C8 Vet, which as you see I do not own, is 2,750 pounds at 550 brake horsepower. So what I look at is the weight to power ratio 5.0. Well, the Porsche was doing a little bit better on that. So let me, because I think it was at 4.9. So what I want to do is hit my cars. This is how you, if you want to figure out how you own, click on my cars. And we'll scroll down here to the Porsche. And the reason why I'm making a big fuss about this is Porsche has been very dominant. So you see it's at 5.3. So the increase in weight with the slightly more horsepower, 510 versus the 500 in the Vet, definitely is trying to tweak that appropriately. But that's a big thing because a lot of people have been in the Porsche. They've smoothed out Daytona a little bit, as you see here. And the other thing is at Sebring turn 4, there's now a gain time checkpoint. So that's the slow left-hander where you could really cut that curb and get a straight line advantage down to the hairpin. Now, that's for just the patch. Now we're going to talk about the BoP. Now, this is specific only to the Daytona 24 hours. You will note there are some BoP changes. The BMW M8, no change. The Corvette gains 5 kilos. That is because the Vets in a straight line seem to be pretty up there. The Ferrari has lost 1% of power, and the Porsche has had the worst BoP, gaining 5% but losing 1% on the motor. So for those who are not mathematically inclined, here's what that means. At 500 brake horsepower, 1% is 5. So it's 495 brake horsepower now. And then they had to add 11 pounds to it. So it is very clear that they're trying to slow the Porsche down for Daytona 24. So the 5 kilos was already in the patch, but now they've added the further power reduction. The Ferrari 488, I think this is for mostly fuel conservation. So if you come over here, I do own the Ferrari 488. and I'll show you what's listed at. So it's already at 490 horsepower. So notice the power to weight is 5.6. It's a little bit heavier car. So they're reducing the power so they can get the car, I think, to the end of all the stunts. The Vet, we've already talked about. The Beamer, we've talked about. Now, let's go over to GT3. The Huracan loses 1% of its fuel capacity and gets hit with a 10 kilogram increase. So 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. So that is definitely going to slow that car down a little bit and a little bit less fuel. So what this tells me is the times were that far apart where they had to make a double change to the car. So very interesting BOP. Um, Looking at let me look at the parameters. So let me show you the parameters. So you need a D.40. So if you are C licensed, you're eligible. And there are 2 time slots. Yours surely will be in time slot 2. Here are the session parameters. Key point is field size is 55 cars, so very important. So my takes on the BOP, I'm going to start with GT3. Well, it's very clear that they're giving the Beamers a fighting chance because you wouldn't have taken away fuel and added this much weight. And so what that tells me is the Huracan has been a very good car so far in the IMSA season. With this change, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if the Huracan will tear up its tires a little longer as it relates to double stunning. Curious to see that. I'm going to skip to the prototype real quick. 40 horsepower is a lot to lose. I think you're going to see more trimmed out cars as aforementioned. But I think it's going to be easier to drive. And where I think you're really going to see it is not so much at Daytona, but on more twisty circuits. The car being a bit more compliant. For GTE, as you know, I drive the Porsche 911 in IMSA. I knew a BOP was coming. I was expecting more weight, so I'll take the 5 kilogram hit. The power reduction, though, that could be for fuel mileage. I'm not sure if that is for fuel mileage or if it's because it's getting off of the corner so well that it can get to its top speed quicker than the other 3 cars. So I'll be very curious to see how that relates, and we're going to have to do some research and races. The BMW M8 no change, I'm not surprised by that. I'm really not surprised by that. Seeing how it has struggled at Silverstone, for example, and I'm not seeing it as much as I'm seeing the other 3 cars. So they may have chosen to make that the unstated baseline and then adjust everybody off of that. The Vet getting a 5 kilogram bump, I could see that. It's really good in a straight line. But the Corvette has been struggling with front end grip from what I've been hearing. So now you're adding more weight. It's going to be interesting. But the Ferrari 488 GTE, they've taken a little bit of power off. It already has the worst power to weight ratio of the 4. And clearly, to me, this is a fuel mileage admission that we're trying to get you to the end of your stint. That means you're going to have to trim out that car a little bit. Um, so it gives the Ferrari driver something, but looking at this, I think the Ferrari is probably not the alternate car now. I still think the Vet is the car to beat at Daytona. Um, but I now think the Beamer has been elevated just a little bit. And candidly, as a Porsche driver, I don't know where the Porsche falls. I don't know. But it's definitely a closing up of some things. So I'll be curious to see how it happens. Anyway, that's about it from now. Thanks for watching us. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe. Take care, everybody.